Great. Good morning, everybody, both to the people here in Hamburg and those connected via the Teams links. And it's very nice to have you here. And before we start, we give a bit of information on this event. So this is the agenda. We will go from some feedback from City Moonshot, the Ertico City Moonshot, to the Tnts relevance for cities, and through SENSORIS and startups that will have interest in working with Tnts, and to the new city parking solution and a city example. So these are our speakers. You will get to know them better throughout this meeting. And last but not least, this webinar is recorded. So this is a hybrid event, but recorded for future references. So by participating and by interacting with us, you give us the right to share your image or your content in the future. And this is all from me for the moment. We are going to the first speaker of the day. And this is Frank Daems, Senior Manager at Ertico. He's been working for and with Tnts for the last 4 years. And he will give us an overview on the results of the Ertico City Moonshot. Please, Frank, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Carmela. Let me put the right format. This should be. So thank you for being here. Tnts goes urban. Of course, nobody knows, I guess, many people don't know what Tnts is, but the next speakers will explain it in detail. In fact, this event is the result of an action of Ertico that has been done in the last year. And in fact, Ertico has contacted about 300 or 400 cities around the world. And this action was called the City Moonshot. And the City Moonshot delivered a lot of insights on how cities were handling data. And in fact, the insight that we have is that, well, there is still a lot of work to be done on data gathering and data processing and whatever data computing from a city point of view. And what we wanted to do from a TNITS, TNITS stands for Transport Network ITS. It's an association within Ertico that looks into one of the major data streams that are going to be publicly available to what is called national access points. So there's a lot of words, and I hope that we can explain it through this session. So let's give me a glance on how this City Moonshot led to this activity. So what is exactly Ertico ITS Europe? It's a partnership of 120 companies that represent 6 stakeholders. So all the stakeholders like suppliers, OEMs, but also authorities are within this partnership that looks to transport and mobility. And in fact, it's one of the major organizers. It's the organizer of the World Congress here in Hamburg. So what is now TNITS? Well, TNITS, there is a kind of duality here. On one hand, it is let's say what we call innovation platform within Ertico, where we also have a multi-stakeholder presence to discuss, let's say, the TNITS standard and to discuss the deployment of that standard. But on the other hand, it's also the name of the standard itself, the data sharing mechanism that we use for map-related data. So this picture gives you already a short glance, but there will be more details on coming that. So how this looks like. So within Europe, there is from the member states and driven by the Commission, there is this idea of data sharing from an authority point of view. And in fact, we are looking to 3 parallel data streams, one coming from what we call base layer data, the map, the digital map representation. The other one is more related to services, and the third one is more related to public transport. And Europe is building, let's say, a national access point system in all the member states that makes this data available for use. And TNITS is one of those 3 parallel streams that represents, in fact, what we call base layer data. In the Commission, they call it static data, and it is shared across the national access points going to the services. What does it do? In one direction, it provides reliable, fresh, updated, and trusted information. On the arrow in the other direction is more like a quality check, that if the data is maybe having a problem, that there is a mechanism to update the data at the database of the provider, which is in many cases the authority. So, what are now the regions for member states and road operators to implement TNITS interfaces? And I give this as an example for cities, of course, because today TNITS is focusing a lot on not so much yet on cities, but it is our aim to do that. That's the reason why we have this meeting or this webinar. So far, the member states are there looking to, of course, applications. Today, it is all about digital maps and the fresh update of accurate maps. Tomorrow, it is more like supporting new applications from the infrastructure point of view. Of course, from the vehicle point of view, it already exists, like ISA, the intelligent speed advice, for instance. And there is a lot to do on the vehicle side, but on the infrastructure side, there is still some work to be done. And then, of course, we'll also look at it automated drive. An automatic car in the future should recognize that it has a speed limit. It should say, like, okay, I know that I have to drive 70 kilometers an hour. It should get this data out of somewhere from the authority. And that's exactly where we see the role of TNITS, to provide a trusted interface to this automation. So services using the TNITS standard interface or a needed asset in the mobility data space. So it's European, it's not world, it's European based, but we have interest. And there is recognition also from other continents, like even Australia, USA, and Japan, on this way of data exchange. The information is based on standards, so it's a SEN standard, Technical Committee 278 Workgroup 7. And what is now exactly the difference from this data with, let's say, what you find from Google or any other private company? It's all about the trust. This data comes from the authority. The authority says this data is trusted by definition. Of course, you can enlarge the trust by technical means as well. I will put, okay. So this program is building intelligence. So we like to interact with cities. And in fact, we like to understand this diagram where we have data provisioning, the city authority. On the other hand, we have applications that are interested for the cities. The authority gives data to these applications, but they get the application back that fulfills the need for the authority. And then we have some innovators to, let's say, think about new applications and new ways of sharing this data. And in fact, if you look to our speakers here, they represent this gremium. We have data provisioning, like SENSORIS, we have startups, like the innovators, and we have mobility applications, like parking, already established. So in fact, we have all the people representing to give you, let's say, an interest point of view here. Okay. Give you an insight on this Ertico Cities moonshot. This is, in fact, there is a World Congress site going on this afternoon. I did not have the right information when it was, because it changed. but there is in your program a complete overview, a complete feedback of the Ertico City Moonshot, I think this afternoon at 2 o'clock. But I give you the, let's say, a glance on what we detected for data, because that's exactly the, let's say, the data sharing is exactly the topic of TNITS. So one of the major topics is, of course, data in this city moonshot. And the following slides are an intermediate report on the data status. So you can, of course, always go to the link that we will share in the presentation afterwards on our website. But if you look to the city moonshot, then there is a kind of data status. What is the status on provisioning? And then you see that, it's in fact looking to the diagram shown before. It's of course on the data provisioning side. Then the question that we have posed is what type of transport traffic data is typically collected in your city? And then you see that the cities have responded like, okay, almost every type of data is somewhere present, like traffic management is present, average speed is present, and so on. On the right side, are you willing to pay for data for mobility service providers? So from the business point of view, then you see also like a kind of likely equal response. Like 39% of the cities have said, yes, we want to pay for it. There are about 21% of cities that say, no, we don't like to pay for it. And then there are a number of cities that still have to make up their minds and so on. So it's quite interesting that these cities have, let's say, a difference of opinion on that. Also here, it's about the sharing. It's the other side. So do the city authorities share data? And then you see that a lot of cities are still in this I do not know even status. MDS, Mobility Data Specification, is somewhere also a data sharing mechanism. They respond to that. And the important element, which is DATEX, DATEX2, traffic information is quite oftenly used. And it's one of these three parallel streams that I'm talking about that are in the, let's say, European vision to be the standard for data sharing from an authority point of view. So who are you willing to share your data with? You see, okay, we want to share it with ministries and governments. We want to share it for mobile communication companies, scientific institutes, whatever. So it's kind of equal division as well for the people, for the cities that like to share their data. There is, let's say, an equal division almost on to who they want to share it. So this program is in fact an interactive discussion after the lectures. It's about data sharing. What are the roadblocks? What are the stimulators for cities to share data? What are the need for applications? Because we see the application, of course, the king. If the application should fit the city. So what do they need for data? What are then the roles of the city authorities, the role of standards and the role of TNITS? That's of course our last point, but it would be good to have this session as a learning session or an interactive session to give insight on those topics. And then my last slide is my end of presentation. And I'm looking forward to a very interactive session here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Frank. I would like to ask the colleagues here in the room and also online to ask questions, questions you might have. Please, in here, raise your hand and we will get your question. And from the audience at home, you can either type your question in the chat box or raise your hand, virtually raise your hand and ask your question. So if we do not have questions, might see, we go to our next speaker, who is Bert Boterbergh. He holds a Master in Geography from the University of Ghent and is currently head of ICT in the Agency for Road and Traffic in Flanders. He represents Flanders, Belgium, in several TNITS working groups and is vice president of the TNITS platform since November 2019. Recently, Bert took part in the establishment of the Belgian NAP and is active in TNITS Go and NAPCO. Bert will dive into the TNITS what and why, what we do, showing what TNITS can do for public authorities, including cities, and what important asset a TNITS service can be for a city. So please, thank you, Bert.
Thank you, Carmela, and good afternoon already, everyone. Okay. So first of all, Frank mentioned it already. It's in TNITS, it's all about bringing fresh and trusted map data to intelligence transport services. In fact, that's the vision that we are working on, and we are doing this by facilitating and fostering the exchange of ITS-related spatial road data between the road authorities on the left side towards the map providers and the service providers. So why is this important that we start by the road authorities? I myself work for the road authority in Flanders, the Agency for Roads and Traffic, and we are the ones that put the traffic regulations in place and make all kinds of changes on the physical infrastructure in the field. So in fact, we are the first step in the data chain, and we are delivering, or we have the data, and we can of course provide trusted data towards the map providers who then retrieve this data. They can verify the data and then can integrate the data in their production process. So using this data chain between the road authorities and the map makers, we make sure that when we put some changes on the physical infrastructure in the field, that these changes can rapidly go through the map makers towards the end users who are using navigation systems, all kinds of applications to find their way. So we, as TNITS, we are an association coordinated by Ertico. We have some road authorities from the member states, such as, of course, Belgium, which I can represent, but also Sweden, Finland. There's also a cooperation with the map service providers and the ITS and transport organizations, such as TomTom here and Geo Junction. We have a standard, a technical standard since 2018, who defines the interface and the data classes that we use in our interface. We provide also implementation support, and of course we are always looking at new use cases to provide the necessary data for these use cases to make sure that they can. All information is also, you can find it on the TNITS website, which is hosted by Ertico. Now, why did we start our activities in the TNITS association in Flanders? So Flanders is the northern part of Belgium. I myself work for the Agency for Roads and Traffic, and we are responsible for the regional roads and the motorways in Belgium, in Flanders. On the other hand, we have also about 300 cities and municipalities who are also providing their updates through the TNTS service. And in fact, there's no law in place, there's no obligation for them to do it. But we see that about 200 of them are quite active in this cooperation. So even though they are not obliged to do it, they see that there is there's value in providing the updates towards the map providers. How did we do it? So we, as an Agency for Roads and Traffic, we joined forces with the Department of Mobility and Public Works. And we provided one central traffic sign database for the whole of Flanders, also towards cities and municipalities. And in that traffic sign database, they can all do the changes that they make in the field. Also the changes they plan to do. They can make plans of it. And this database, together with the road database of Flanders, provides all of the information that is sent through the Tnts service towards the map providers. We have a pilot for, service in place since 2016. I think around 2018, 2019, we improved this towards a product service. So we are providing two kinds of data. First of all, we have the point feature, so in fact the traffic signs and all the content that is on the sign itself. But also we have an algorithm that takes the information on the speed limits, the traffic sign indicating a maximum speed limit, and we make also a linear map of Flanders with all speed limits. And it's an algorithm that I think a few times a week makes some updates and then sends these updates towards the data chain. So of course we need all the static speed limits to do this. We are providing all changes in the traffic signs on the speed limits and also the calculated or the line features that are calculated based on the changes of the speed limits. But we also are providing all kinds of warning signs, restriction signs on vehicle type and vehicle properties, and also a number of mandatory signs implying limitations. And so we still have lots of more types of data that we can provide towards the service, but we are taking it a few steps at a time. And something that is now being implemented is the data of the variable zone 30s in the school environments. This data, together with when is the 30 kilometers an hour limited in place, so the calendar of the traffic sign is also provided towards the service. Of course, it's important that you provide the necessary tools for the updating of the traffic signs, and that's what we do with what we did by the Moving app, which is it's a very intuitive and very easy to use application that makes it possible to validate the traffic signs in the field, and you can also put new traffic signs immediately if you notice that something changed along your road network. So what are now the main benefits of Tnts? Of course, as we already said, it's a trusted source. It starts from the road authority. We are providing the changes, so we are continuously providing incremental updates, and it's on a daily basis. It's a standard, so once you have implemented it, you can reuse it for different member states. It's machine readable, so it's completely optimized. And you have one interface and one data license for each member state. I think it's the Creative Commons and the free open data license which are currently used. And of course, this information is of course ready to use for supporting assistance systems. And for the road authorities, so also for the cities and municipalities, I think the two biggest advantages are on increasing the traffic safety and increasing the traffic livability. So each authority, also the cities, all have that as a goal to achieve. If that Tnts is providing necessary information to achieve this. Imagine if you want to avoid the heavy traffic from going through the city center. You put the traffic signs in place, but the navigation systems will keep on sending these kinds of traffic through the city center, although traffic signs may be already weeks in place. So that are the use cases that we see that we as Tnts can make a difference. And of course, this is only possible by providing all this valuable and fresh information towards the road users. It's also a cost-effective way to support ISA. And of course, you have the data as a road authority, as a city. So it's only a good thing if you can maximize the reuse of the data that you already have. So yeah, I think this is it from my part.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Bert. I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
And it's about the involvement of cities. So in Flanders, you started your service as on a regional basis, and then you went more and more local. And what would you say it's the advice you feel like giving to regions and member states to involve cities in TNITS? And on the other hand, how can cities, step up to TNITS?
An advice, we struggled with it also a few years on how to achieve this. I think what helped is that you have the necessary tools in place that make it easy to capture all of the changes. That's one thing. Other thing that we also notice that the legislation is not the solution. If you just say you have to do it by law, there are so many laws in place that the cities and municipalities, they have to choose what they have to do. So you have to find an incentive to make sure that they want to do it. So you have to provide them with
what's in it for them.
What's in it for them? That's in fact.
Okay. Thank you very much. And a follow-up question is about the tools you mentioned to be in place. Can you name a couple of examples? Like, do you refer to science database or updates of?
Yeah, the tools. We just focused on a very easy to use graphical user interface to make, in fact, signalization plans. And so if you as a road authority or a city are planning to make some changes on a certain part of your road network, you're also always making a plan with the traffic signs. Where do you want to put them, your road markings and so on. So that's one of the tools that we provided towards the cities and municipalities, and for them it's very useful to make a plan on a digital way, and then you can reuse all of these planned situations to send in your TNITS service.
Thank you very much. And I see there is one question from Sylvie. You can go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question, if that's okay with you.
Am I unmuted now?
No, then it's okay. Sorry.
Don't.
Yes, I have a question about the movers app. So it's a fixture, and then on a location to update one of the traffic signs. And I was wondering, who is the intended audience of this app? Who's the user?
The user are each of the road authorities in Flanders. So the cities, municipalities, also my colleagues who are
Your colleagues.
who are doing the necessary inspections in the field.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, another question.
Just a short, in addition to that one, what is the current discipline of all the local road authorities filling out all the metadata issues that you probably have in your database?
But what do you mean by discipline?
Yeah, do they fill out the complete form? You have all these metadata for specific traffic measures probably, and is it actually filled out completely as you're asked to?
We just want to ask them what they know. We don't want to ask too many information, because otherwise they will not provide it. So it's always a balance between to get more information, but it's always a risk on losing.
Sure. Well, I compare with the roadworks database. It's probably more or less similar, and there we see, of course, that some data is missing, and then in your end user service, you have the simple one. So I expect this is going on here as well.
But the advantage that we have is that we start already from an existing database and a library with all kinds of traffic signs. So most of the information they can put in by just using selected fields. So it's very user friendly to do so, and it doesn't take a lot of time to provide the info that we need and that they need.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have other questions. We go to our next speaker, who is Jean-Charles Pandazis. He holds a master's degree in electrical engineering and joined Ertico in 2009, developing many activities related to digital maps and advanced driver assistance systems. Currently, his focus and responsibilities is for twin mobility, as well as for the overall Ertico platforms coordination. He is also, from their launch, the coordinator of the industry-driven platform Pandazis and SENSORIS. Jean-Charles will present the SENSORIS platform, its role in the city mobility data space, and the possible cooperation with Tnts. Thank you, Jean-Charles.
Thank you, Carmela. Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here, physically, I would say, after all this time. Yes, SENSORIS is somehow a standard that enables data provision. It's realizing something that many people wanted to do for a long time. At a moment, we were talking about application like floating car data. This standard is going in that direction, and I want to present you this. In fact, SENSORIS stands for Sensor Ingestion Interface Specification. It was developed first by HERE Technology, and then brought to Ertico for being coordinated and becoming a world standard, de facto standard at this moment. We started the work in 2016. We had the year after a first draft of the standard. And then this standard is all about sensor data that you upload from the vehicle to the cloud. First the vehicle cloud, and then from the cloud of the vehicle, then you can provide those data to service cloud. But first it has to go to the OEM cloud. So we have first defined the upload of the data, and then we have defined a request channel. It means that you are able from a service to ask a vehicle in a region to provide you certain data that would be available from its sensors. Currently, because of our type of membership, many of our members and stakeholders are interested to have this standard as a SEN and ISO standard, because the de facto standard, which is only industrial, doesn't work for, let's say, public authorities or some organization who wants also to implement that standard. Right, so this is a little bit from our member. You see it's a very diverse. We have about 38 members. It goes from the OEMs, but you see there are also map makers, there are service providers, there are map makers, so different type of cloud, like IBM, cloud service provider. So what it is really, what we define in SENSORIS are these interfaces here, this one and this one. So it's a data interface. We say nothing about what is the standard communication standard that is uploading the data and operating, right? We just defined the standard, what is the data model, the data dictionary, and the data serialization. We define the architecture of that standard, how the jobs are managed. So when you start uploading data, I mean, we have also a header for all this, and then also a test procedure to see if this is done correctly. Oh, sorry. So what is in SENSORIS data today and what is significant for cities? Okay, the standard is divided, the data is divided in different categories and then events, right? And then the categories, they can be like brake, driving behavior, localization, so map, object detection, road attributes, traffic events, traffic regulation, these type of things. And then you see in light red, these are the vehicle status data. So what the sensor can provide from that vehicle on the road at that moment, right? And then environment data, which is more, let's say, related to the environment, the infrastructure, what the vehicle sees and how it can provide this information back, right? So as we said before, TNITS is a trusted, let's say, database, I mean, provide trusted data. But what is reality in the field is another thing. Of course, it's normally what should be, but maybe not. So, and this interaction is maybe also interesting for our work and cooperation with the TNITS to just close the loop. Right? So then, oh, sorry, I don't know how to. So the first use case that we see and that the application that will come on the market with this is the self-healing map. I mean, what the vehicle sees from the road network, and that are map attributes, and to either to see with its map if there is that is in the vehicle that there is discrepancy and then upload the data, or just upload everything it sees, like speed limit, for example, which is one of the I would say important information. So road geometry and attributes, lane geometry, POI, road conditions as well. Is it raining? So are the wipers functioning or not? Is the temperature at a very low, so there is ice danger and things like this, right? Then there are also real-time services. This is directly connected to let's say a detection of flow, so traffic flow, traffic incident, hazard warning, environmental condition, and then traffic signage. So this goes also with this. And then statistical analysis, right? We can, of course, store data on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and then look at this from more helicopter view, and then analyze those data in order to develop strategies to manage the traffic as, let's say, a prediction, right? So this is this. Now cooperation with TNITS. We had once that slide that shows a little bit who is doing what, where is the map, where is TNITS, and SENSORIS from the car was providing let's say feedback, right, to the map provider, which also is connected to the public and road authorities, right? But we receive also data from TISA, so TPEC, which is traffic information. So all this I think what is interesting is that now we have these possibilities to connect all these data together and to make it coherent. That's the challenge, right? Who is right? We are also very active. We have a liaison, and one of the, I would say, liaison that we have is with the Open Auto Drive Forum. This brings together different type of standard like Tnts, like NDS, Daems, TISA, and also in Japan, SIP ADUS. This is the FOT in Japan where they are testing automated driving functionalities. We are also in contact with VSS, but the data for road safety project, this is from the Commission, and this is something that is very interesting because it's trying to define how in Europe we will use, I would say, typically safety data, right? And SENSORIS has been chosen of one of the standards to provide access to these. And then we are working with, on one side, with SEN TC270 working group 7, like TNITF. In fact, it's the same group, right? And we are working with them for the, let's say, the data, the attributes, and then for the liaison that we're establishing now with TC22 SC31. This is more on the architecture level that we are working with them. Right, this is a little bit what I wanted to tell you as an introduction of what we are doing. And we are very happy to work with TNITS and try to bring these data to everyone.
Thank you very much, Jean-Charles. I have a question for you. It's about timing. So when do you think application and services that are enabled by SENSORIS will reach the market? And when they will, how is SENSORIS dealing with the personal data and GDPR?
Okay, right. So in fact, the application, typically the self-healing map, this is coming now on the market. I mean, they typically, I guess, HERE technology, but others, they are providing these services because they have very close contact to OEMs. They are even owned by some OEM. So there is a direct connection and interest, I would say, of the vehicle, the manufacturers, and the map makers to have a feedback from the field. Right? So these are one of the first application that is coming up. And then incident detection, I think this is also something that will come, and the environmental data is also something that we need to now have kind of a roadmap, I would say, for these different applications, but I think this will be the first. And then concerning the GDPR or the personalization of the data, the way we do it for the moment, we provide in our data, I would say, information related to the vehicle and the owner of the vehicle, but this goes to the OEM, right? The one that has a contract with the owner of the vehicle normally, and it is not our responsibility. We provide the mean, in fact, to upload the data, but we are not handling that at all. If on the vehicle side, these fields are filled or not, it's the problem of the vehicle manufacturers to know those data. This is already done today, for example, for maintenance data. Right, the OEM are uploading data from the vehicle to their cloud or to their system, maintenance system, in order to know this vehicle has this type of problem, then they need an intervention, right? And this is in the framework of the contract. So then when the data are up there, then of course it's when they are transmitted to a service cloud, which will be then the responsibility of the one owning the data up there to decide how to aggregate the data, and then how to take out any, I would say, information that enable the identification of the driver, for example. So directly SENSORIS is not dealing with it. We just offer the possibility to upload the data.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very clear.
Yeah.
Do we have any question for Jean-Charles at this moment? Any other question? Okay, so if not, then we go to our next part, which is focusing on startups. So at Ertico, we have the Ertico Startup Initiatives, and we work with startups, and we try to include startups in our project to cooperate together with, to co-create together with, of course, to support innovation and support startups. The two startups that we have here today are SIMACAN and MOBITO. We will start with Rene Bruijne, who is the Business Development Director for the distribution retail platform of SIMACAN, with a focus on urban distribution. In the view of Rene, logistics is data-driven, and in order to make logistics as sustainable as possible, the whole sector needs to take the next extra step in sharing data with municipalities and the other way around. Rene will give us an overview of SIMACAN and also on how Tnts services can benefit their work.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Rene.
You said that very well.
Thanks.
If I may say so. Let me share my screen with the audience. Last mile info. Actually, it is what it is. It is what it says it is. It's the last mile information for people, distributors going into the city, own transport, owning their own transport, but especially also for distribution companies. While we as SIMACAN, we provide a lot of platform for the retailers in the Benelux, like Albert Heijn, Jumbo, but also for the parcel service for PostNL, doing this on trip. So if they go into a city, we help them find the best route, the best possible way to deliver the goods and making the best ETAs possible. But they are facing a problem, and we are all facing a problem with the last mile, because I think we have a very huge thing we should take care of, is making cities more livable. I think this is a huge thing we are looking to, making it not only cleaner, but making it also livable. And that's our aim with, this is a startup. We just got the funding for this last mile info. What we see is more and more regulations coming up in cities. And those regulations, well, it doesn't help distributors if they want to go and deliver the goods for their shops into those cities. And you can see them, environmental zones coming up. We also we see zero emission zones coming up, weight restrictions, but also unloading places. All those data sets should be available for distributors, and should be made actionable pre-trip. So not only on trip, but if you have a planning as a distributor, you want to have this pre-trip in your data sets. And of course, we see the national access points coming up. So we want to connect to them. But I guess it was your questions. We also should look to the data quality. Because if you have a diversion or if you have a road construction work, it's good that this is in a data set from the municipalities or from a national access point. But you all know the construction workers. They will block it from Monday until Friday, but on Friday they will work harder. So on Friday it will be open again. So we have to use the crowd also to use to make it more, well, more flexible and more dynamic, I would say. And this is what we are aiming at. More interactions with municipalities, also doing the analyzing the regulations as we see in our platform. We sometimes see trucks going in a reverse flow mode, delivering to a shop. Of course, this is totally not good, but it's the only way to get to this to this shop. So drivers are communicating this with one and each other. The only way to go to this shop is doing this the reverse way. And how do we get this data to the guys making the regulations? Because then the regulations aren't good, in my perspective. And that's what we aim to do. We will make a platform connecting this with the national access point we have in the Netherlands, but also connecting it to, for instance, where we have very good cooperations with TomTom. So making sure that the data coming from the national access point is related to the TomTom data, and then trying to help or trying to interact with the community, because they're in the Netherlands. There are already several apps for drivers, which they communicate with one and each other, in which they say, don't go this way because it is blocked or it is already unblocked. So that's what we aim at, to make a platform giving this data pre-trip to the distributors, so they can use it into their planning, but also on trip, so we can interact with the advanced planning systems and give this data back to the planning systems, and making real time a new planning for those distribution companies. And as said, we are just starting this. We are starting this with a consortium. All the names are on this slide. Also, a municipality is in it. It's Tilburg, which is a nice city in the southern part of the Netherlands. And that's what we're aiming at to do. We will start in the 1st of January with this big project. Yeah, and I hope to interact with other municipalities here or other service providers, because we believe we can only do this together to get better data quality. Again, pre-trip for the distributors, but also on trip, making the best route to deliver the goods.
Thank you very much, Rene. Absolutely, I totally agree with you. These things should be done together, because one sector alone cannot achieve sustainable results. And of course, with Tnts, especially focusing on regulation and static data, you might want to use the data on max weight and max width to avoid bashing into the infrastructure. But something that you mentioned, it's also the feedback from users on regulation, because if you have one street that is one way and trucks cannot access it the correct way, that's a very good input for city planners as well. So that's a very good outcome to look forward to. So best of luck. I don't know if we have any questions.
Are there any questions or any questions online?
If wouldn't think so at the moment, you can always put it in the chat.
Can I have a question?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
So Rene, thanks for this information. It's really a nice application that looks into a niche, but a very important niche in cities for guiding the last mile. But can I ask you, how do you see the TNITS role in your application?
Yeah, we don't know yet. That's the honest answer in it. As said, we will start this project in the 1st of January. We'll make we will start with the architecture of the platform together with all those. But we will certainly take this in account and see where we connect to in this.
It was a good thing that you also said that you use data from the national access points. So there is also already a link with TNITS on this.
Yes,
Maybe a comment from my side on TNITS. I don't think it's been mentioned before, but I studied it, and about 80 to 90% of the data that is exposed under the TNITS interface is open data. So those pilots that are publishing TNITS changes, they often use Creative Commons licenses. So that might be an input for you as an SME because it's available under a good license condition for you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and finger crossed for the starting of this interesting project in January. And we now go to our next speaker, who is George Cambanis. George is the co-founder and managing director of MOBITO. With a team in Brussels and one in Athens, he has been building a mobility data marketplace for the last 2 years, innovating in the space of data exchange. George studied in the University of Chicago and HSC in Paris, and prior to founding MOBITO, has worked for EU leading fintech startup. So again, George will give us an overview on MOBITO and on how MOBITO might be able to use TNITS data and services for specific service linked to their activities. Thank you, George.
Great. Thank you, and thank you for having us here. Great pleasure to interact with all of you, and a great pleasure to present to you a little bit more about what we do with MOBITO. We founded MOBITO a couple of years ago, as we said, and we're very focused on helping cities and enterprises to leverage more value from their own data. And the way we look into the market, we see a very interesting and a milestone taking place in the space of data and the space of mobility data. And just to quote a couple of numbers that seem to indicate this, on the one hand, we see a lot of the data professionals, the people that use the data, to be pushing their companies and to be requesting from the companies to use more and more external data. And at the same time, this is very much echoed by the companies themselves, the C-suites of the companies, which are investing more and more onto accessing external data. So this creates very new opportunities. And you can think of all of the ML and the AI applications that suddenly have this new treasure of data outside of the company and not only within a company. However, at the very same time, we face and companies face a lot of challenges that prevent them in fully grasping this opportunity and in being one of those companies that do that faster than others. And some of these challenges that we see have a lot to do with the lack of structured exchanges. And this has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of the data is lacking the right licensing and the right pricing and the right way of being exchanged. It also, of course, has to do with the fact of sensitive data that was mentioned a couple of times already today, and the fact that this paralyzes a lot of the companies that don't know how to treat the sensitivity of the data. And of course, maybe the most important part is the data operations challenges, the fact that many companies don't have the internal resources or the skill sets to build their own data businesses in that way. And that is what we have been addressing with MOBITO. We have developed our own mobility data exchange platform, very much focused on providing the right tools for data owners on the one hand to control who and how their data is being accessed, and data consumers on the other hand to be able to streamline the way of accessing external data. And to do that, we have been developing functionalities mostly around data governance, data policy, and of course, a data catalog, data content that can be accessed from the MOBITO data exchange. So looking into that in a little bit more detail, when we're speaking about the data owner functionalities, we basically help data owners to convert their data, as we say, into a data product. And these data products have embedded tools that allow them to control how their data is being accessed, how their data is being priced, and even how their data is being masked per use case in order to be able to treat some of those anonymization issues. Similarly, on the other hand, on the data consumers, the way we see our work is to try to automate and try to productize the data journey of accessing external data. And there we're offering the tools to discover, to evaluate, to integrate, and to maintain those integrations with third-party data providers. So who do we do this for, and what are the use cases that we have been focusing on? We have been very focused on specific industries, and these are the consumption use cases. And these are companies coming from the automotive space, insurance, as well as mobility operators. And there, based on the demands that these industries have, we have been populating the platform through data partnerships with data coming from mobility, vehicle, and weather data as our three big data categories, and facilitating the different use cases into these industries. And how do we see ourselves potentially contributing, and how do we want to contribute to the TNITS data sharing chain? Well, from what we have heard today, a lot of what TNITS is trying to do and has to do for this to achieve is, of course, the publication of these data standards from the cities and from the road authorities, and also the broadcasting, so that the data eventually derives its value from having use cases, from having applications, from having end users appreciating those standards. And that's where MOBITO can help by providing both the tools for cities to perhaps control how and to whom they want to publish that data, but also a lot of what we have done could be useful in bringing those industry use cases into this equation. And with that, we're very, very keen and open to interact with more municipalities, more companies, and more standards. As a data marketplace, it's kind of our de facto to be open in that way. And very happy to engage with you and to be here.
Thank you very much, George. Do we have any question? Because I do have one, but before I start, maybe not this time. So you mentioned there is a data platform, but what kind of data is available on your platform? And for cities who might want to try your services, do you have a trial kit to have a look and get familiar with it so cities can scout a bit?
Thank you, Pamela. Yes, that's a great question. Allows me to talk a little bit more about our use cases. Maybe that's the best way to talk about what type of data we have by referring to a little bit more detail into the use cases. So when we mention that we work with automotives, that's usually us working with the R&D departments of automotives. And there we will be providing vehicle data, we will be providing driving profile data, we will be providing even road quality data that was mentioned today, which can be used by different simulations, different duty cycle analysis, and all of these, let's say, research analysis that goes into producing vehicles and into the work of an OEM. Similarly, when we mention insurances, there we typically work with the pricing departments, for example, or the product departments of insurances. And there, what is very interesting from a motor insurance perspective is things such as what are the most risky parts of a road, where are the most accidents occurring, as well as how can that be correlated with traffic and other environmental conditions. So this is the type of data that is already integrated and can be available through the MOBITO data marketplace. And of course, to add to that, one of our key focus is mobility data. So when we mention the mobility operators, we're very interested in all sorts of data coming from vehicle assets, from micromobility assets, from different sort of assets that allow someone to understand traffic patterns, traffic intelligence, and traffic information.
Okay, and in this overview, how can TNITS fit? Have you already thought about it?
Yeah, I think the most, let's say, straightforward way that we would be interested in being part of the TNITS ecosystem and work is very much on the format part. So as a neutral data exchange, integrating data from different providers, this is an extra layer that sometimes we need to introduce in our data categories, and of course, this is something that we are very keen to adopt whenever it's widely present. And so we're very keen to hear about the different standards today and how we can advocate for that, integrate that, promote that within our own data coverage as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
This was
Jean-Charles.
one of my questions, that you are talking about the MOBITO marketplace. So with which data it is fed? I mean, so because SENSORIS typically is uploading data or sensor data from the vehicle to not a marketplace, but to OEM cloud, right? And then providing these data can be provided to another place. So here, somehow, from where do you get your data?
Right. So when we mention the data owners, the data providers in the marketplace, those are typically companies themselves. So for example, when I mentioned that we have a coverage of vehicle data, that can come from all different types of fleet owners or fleet operators. Lately, we have also been onboarding OEM data products, aggregated data products. And therefore, yes, from us, MOBITO doesn't have the end sensor. We don't capture the data. We provide the exchange to allow data owners to exchange their data. It's typically coming from enterprises, but already in our marketplace, we even have open data, which is...
You defined a data format for that, a standard, I mean, your own standard, I mean, your own, yeah.
No, we haven't done that. We haven't done that.
So maybe we should talk.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's a good takeaway.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good cooperation insights then.
I have a question too. May I ask a question? You were talking about accidents and insurance companies. Could you elaborate a bit on that one, the data sets? Because that could help cities really making it more livable.
Definitely. So yeah, we see, I think that's one of the more interesting data use cases and one of the newest with a lot of different applications. So we see different ways of accessing this intelligence. One, perhaps the most modern, the most connected, with the highest potential is with the connected vehicle data, where, for example, you can start understanding from the driving behavior of people, where are they steering, where are they accelerating, which parts of the roads are more dangerous. So that is one way of understanding those high incidence, let's say, parts. Apart from that, of course, you can look into more traditional stuff, such as statistics about where accidents happening. This can be accessible either by governmental or other private sources. And perhaps even more remotely looking not into the accidents themselves, but into the road quality. And if you had an indication of which parts of the roads are more or less dangerous, then this can also be a proxy for accidents and for risk.
Yeah, we are also looking in that one because we want to have this data to make sure pre-trip that trucks don't pass that cross points or whatever, those dangerous points, data points. So we are looking at the same.
We can discuss that.
Yeah, there is the loop somehow of public authorities putting traffic signs, for example, like speed limit, like I said, a new one, right? Because they want to reduce the speed because there is a risk. But then there is the effect of how the driver really coping to that, I mean, following that thing without putting a radar on. I mean, that you could see if there is a change, right? So it means that you can observe the impact of your let's say decision of adapting speed and things like this, right? And I think this could be a tool also for the public authorities to somehow, if there is a closed loop like this, to have that. Also interesting.
Thank you very much to all for the discussion. And after the startups and after the management of traffic flows in city, we go to the next topic with our next speaker, which is another sort of nightmare for cities sometimes. Theo Thuis is the international executive at K Park BV, with special attention for new market developments and innovation, operational excellence, smart cities, smart mobility, and smart parking. Theo will present us the EPA Association and the connection and cooperation of different standards, also in relation to cities. Thank you, Theo. We can see you.
Thank you very much, Camilla. Thank you very much for having us here. As a representative of the European Parking Association, connecting to Ertico and connecting also to the Tnts, the parking industry is a huge industry, and we're trying to contribute to urban mobility solutions. So we are representing 22 national parking associations. It's about paid parking, off street 26 million, on street 14 million, more than 500,000 employees, and a turnover of more than 25 billion. It's an estimated non-regulated spaces, non-regulated, so payments is regulating a lot, but non-regulated of 240 million spaces. So in addition to what Rene was referring to, cities are now looking for accessibility and livability, and they would like to reduce the number of car trips. And we as a parking industry, we really believe we are able to contribute by introducing good parking management. And then parking management not only for people, but for example also for goods. And so we're now talking about transfer points for people, for goods, and for energy. And we see all over Europe that our parking facilities are transforming into mobility hubs, a kind of a mobility hub. We would like to reduce the vehicle traffic, as Rene was again referring to, and also George. 30% of all the cars in cities are looking for a parking space. Imagine when you're able to take out this surging traffic by having better data, by having better connections, by having better communications, and trying to direct all these drivers immediately to the place where they would like to stop and park their car. Imagine that is reducing the number of trips and car trips tremendously. So smart parking nowadays is enabled by digitalization, license plate recognition, dynamic pricing, pass, supporting all kind of new mobility modes. It's a dynamic multi-use of public space. A lot of cities would like to give public space back to the citizens. So don't use public space by parking cars because it's destroying your public space. But it needs to be more data driven. Now, just an example, there are a lot of examples in Europe, but Barcelona, for example, a fantastic example of having an integrated parking management system into the urban mobility system. They were able to decrease the number of daily private vehicle trips. And they have really changed the modal split by having other transport modes being become more prominent than only the private car. So we as a parking industry, we have defined our own smart parking landscape by introducing the Alliance for Parking Data Standards, because the parking industry itself is also very diversified. It's big and small companies and cities and all kind of service providers. So we have now introduced a standard into our own industry where you need to be compliant to be able to connect to the other parts of the mobility chain, which is very, very, very important. So now all the national associations are introducing this APDS, these Alliance for Parking Data Standards. And thank you very much again for having us today here, because this is really giving us an entrance fee into the EU standards landscape, because APDS is compliant with DATEX 2, and we are in the approval stage of DATEX 2 Part 6, which make us feasible to connect to the other parts of the mobility chain, talking about traffic regulations, talking about traffic management, talking about all kind of micro mobility, making this seamless customer journey more efficient, less polluting, and less traffic kilometers into the cities, and especially into the inner city, which makes the inner cities of cities, which is a part of the City Moon project, more livable and more accessible. Thank you very much for your attention. And next year in Brussels, we have our annual conference. We're talking about these issues in the EU Green Deal and the future of parking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you as well, Theo. I have one question for you. If you go one slide up, when you show, yes, this one, the color view of different standards, where do you think that TNITS, with its regulation and static information data, can fit in here and help cities with parking?
Yeah, especially for our traffic management, the traffic management 2.0, but also Bert was referring to how to get the signs more actual and accurate. For example, in the urban space, when you have a actual P-signing system, it helps customers, it helps citizens to park their car really on the right spot, and trying to park their car as quick as possible, for example. That's of course coming in the next, let's say, 10 years, the automated and the autonomous driving. We need to talk about autonomous valet parking. So that could also be a real next step in applications. For the short term, we're talking about integration and getting connected with all kind of MaaS providers, mobility as a service provider, because it's all related to trying to establish other modal splits into the inner cities, and really trying to, that's on the benefit of the cities, trying to reduce the number of car trips. And therefore, it's very easy to say, reduce the number of car trips and reduce the number of parking spaces on street, but how to do it, and how to get it done into the human behavior of the drivers itself. And then you have to make it the drivers very easy, because it's all about convenience. It's all about convenience. Nobody is changing his behavior when it's too difficult. It needs to be very easy. And therefore data standards and information needs to be in the car. So these are a couple of ideas which we would like to exchange with you and develop in the next couple of periods.
Thanks a lot. Rene, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question because you are mostly referring, of course, to parking places, but in logistics we have the problem of unloading places. Just for a small stop to unload the Deliveroo or whatever, where the online shopping, we all seem to intend to want to buy online, and it still has to be delivered. And this is becoming a very big problem. So are you also looking into that kind of solutions for on the street?
Yeah. So last week we had a very interesting workshop together with Polis, that's another European network. It was about the curbside, because then you are referring to the curbside. So what is the curbside and what is the sidewalk? So cities would like to reduce the number of on-street parking spaces and are reorganizing the curbside. And the curbside must have capacity to be organizing capacity to be having the availability and offering it to the logistic companies to deliver their goods. But now the discussion is, do they have to organize and do they have to manage the capacity 24 hours a day, or are you going to restrict it, let's say, until 11 o'clock in the morning? 11 o'clock in the morning, and then maybe our mobility shops, a very nice word, mobility hubs, we can come in with also a kind of a last mile, because we are doing a lot of experiments with logistics suppliers who are bringing in the goods into our car parks, and they are distributing the goods in, let's say, the last mile, or even when you were referring to parcels, for example, we work together with parcels, the end customer is coming to our car parks as a mobility hub to pick up the goods by themselves, because then it's the other way around.
Yeah, for parcels, you could do this, but for retail, for supermarkets, that's very difficult.
Yeah,
I know, for instance, there is a very big retailer on a square in Amsterdam where there's only one unloading place. And trucks come, and if they see a truck standing, they go back to the main road and do the round again.
Again. It's the same as cars.
Until it is.
And I have also one question from the audience here, to which question I really agree. It's not just about parking cars, it's also about parking bikes and bike lanes, because it's appalling how in cities the lack of infrastructure, but that's
part of our that's the one I refer to, micro mobility. Yeah? So it's creating more urban space.
Yeah.
So to giving cities like Paris, Anne Hidalgo is now creating a lot of capacity for biking lanes. The bike itself, customers would like to park the bike everywhere on the street. It's typical Dutch phenomena. They would like to bike it everywhere. But for example, e-bikes and cargo bikes are representing a value, and they would like to store it on a safe place. And they would like to store it in a safe place. And there we have to come up with specific services, because that's very important.
And Jean-Charles?
Very short question. In fact, all that goes down to a booking service, I think, right?
Absolutely.
But then this is where it becomes a little bit complicated.
Why?
Because you book and you arrive and there is already someone there, right? And what do? Typically, we had a project. This was in Bilbao, a pilot, which was with, let's say, goods delivery in the city, right? And in fact, they had to enforce. So the city had to enforce the place in order to have the system working, because each time a truck wanted to come in, sometimes you had another vehicle, whatever. It's like, also it's completely different topic. If you want to charge with an electric vehicle somewhere, right? And you have a non-electric vehicle there. So how do you handle the booking service, right? This is one thing. Then the other thing, you said to change the behavior. One very simple thing to change the behavior of people is to increase cost, right? I mean, parking is 10 times more than today, and then people will just leave their car and take, because at the end of the day, it's how much you need to pay that change your behavior, right? Unless you have really, I would say.
Now there's a discussion starting.
No.
If I have to answer these topics, so about booking, that you have to make the difference between on street and off street, public and private space. So pre-booking in public space, I don't know how that's functioning. Could be, but that could be a very interesting experiment. And by I fully agree with you. By in influencing behavior, that's one of my other main topics. What I'm working on, raising prices is from a market point of view. It's very valid, but also we need to think about inclusivity. We need to get everybody on board, and then the answer of just raising the prices is not the only answer, because it cannot be that mobility is only for rich people. You have to be careful.
Thank you very much for that. We appreciate the last sentence. And in the second, I mean, we are looking forward to cooperation, and especially for every information linked to infrastructure from the TNITS point of view, infrastructure and regulation data and static data. And in the interest of time now, last but not least, we go to the actual actor of this event. We will hear from a city. So Dr. Michael Fischer works for the Urban Data Hub Agency for Geoinformation and Surveying here in Hamburg since 2017 and is currently head of real-time data. He studied geography, chemistry, and sociology at the University of Leipzig and holds a PhD in polar science at the Alfred Wegener Institute for Polar and Marine Research. He and his team are responsible to provide real-time data through the Urban Data Platform in Hamburg using open standardized APIs. Please, Michael, go ahead with your presentation.
Yes, thank you. So as I stated there, Urban Data Platform Hamburg, first of all, I would like to start to explain what you can expect from an urban data platform. And the urban data platform is not a specific invention just on the city of Hamburg. It is well emerging across Europe. As you can see, that was a study from the Erasmus Center for Data Analytics, showing that more than 100 cities are already implementing an urban data platform, or actually at least exploring to implement such an urban data platform. It comes from Horizon 2020 initiative from the European Commission. And it's usually conducted through one of the European Smart City and Communities projects funded by the European Commissions. The Urban Data Platform in Hamburg has a historic development during the last couple of years. So it started already like 2012 with the Hamburg Act of Transparency, which basically states that every data which is not protected, like for example from data privacy issues or other things, has to be open to the public. So all the public data from the municipality has to be public data, and that also includes spatial data. And since we are a spatial agency for geoinformation, so our profession is spatial data, and so we are working on how to provide the spatial data maps, as we have seen from TNITS, to the public. And from that development, the Urban Data Platform Hamburg emerged in 2017. So basically, we have taken the spatial data infrastructure, which most of the municipalities already have, and then enhanced that, for example, by the real-time data infrastructure to provide event-driven data. And now, in last year in 2020, it is also one of the main pillars of the digital strategy for Hamburg, basically focusing that we provide data for multi-purpose use for different types of users across the city, and also third parties like startups, for example. So the Urban Data Platform acts basically on the Transparency and Transparency Law Act and the digital strategy for Hamburg. And we ensure the use of technical standards in our urban IT system. As we have heard already during this morning, standards is the key thing to exchange data. We also do a lot of technology consulting for implementing those IT systems for the domain-specific systems, like in the traffic department or anywhere else. And to create to be able to conduct those consulting things, we created a unit which is called Urban Data Hub, which is a combination of which is located at our agency in working together with the Hamburg University. So it's the Hamburg Tabors University. Together with them, we implemented that Urban Data Hub, doing the consulting and then providing the data through the Urban Data Platform. So basically what we're talking about rather a system of systems. So we are rather talking about domain-specific IT systems, for example, from the traffic departments, also from the water department or anyone else. So we can see, like in the south one here, you have like the city road maps, for example, you have the parking systems, you have the EV charging station and so on. All those systems we are just ingesting towards the open data platform and then provide that to you using open standardized APIs to the public. And also using those standardized APIs and also using metadata catalogs, for example, that's the most important thing. It's not like using only standards. It's just one part you need to find the data as well. So we're also taking care of the metadata issues and provide that, for example, then to the European data portal, but also other metadata portals, if you like. To come to the examples, to show you some examples, as you said, my team, we are responsible for providing real-time data to the, through the open data platform, in addition to the statistical data which we're already providing. So some of the examples, for example, we provide construction sites as real-time to the public. So there has been a research and development project until 2021. Including 3 companies to create new devices that put GPS sensors onto the construction point units, and then from then get the live information into the open data platform. We then all the ATS and then provide the data through the standardized open API to the public. At the moment, it's not really public since it was in a research project, but at the moment the Agency for Streets, Bridges and Water is creating a fully operational productive service. And if you would like to see it, just join us at the booth at 4B4. We can show you, or also on the mobility tools, you will see some of them. Another project would be, it's called AVME. It's an abbreviation for a German word, which basically is automatic vehicle counting. We're using infrared cameras throughout the city. We have across the city more than 400 junctions already equipped with those cameras. Basically, we have like more than 2,000 cameras already in place across the city. And that camera is able to detect per lane separately the cars, trucks, and motorbikes. So it's artificial intelligence running on that in the background. And infrared, so no issues with data privacy, and that data is then ingested to the open data platform and provided via the OTC SensorSyncs API to the public as event-based data. The same applies for counting bicycles. As we have already said, we're always talking about cars, but as we have a Green Senate Chancellor now here in Hamburg in place, he's also taking more use on the bicycle infrastructure, and one part is the bicycle counting. So we're using the same technology for counting the bikes. Another project is traffic light forecast. So we are providing, at the moment we are working on the project, providing traffic light signal in real time or near real time, I would say. It's a latency less than 3 seconds, and provide that data to the same API to the public. So if you look just on a map, it makes it easier. As I said, like we're using all the standardized APIs, it's easy to put all the things on one map using the same API. So we have, as I've said, we have the traffic counting, we have the traffic lights, we have the cyclist counting. That's the same. The graph you're seeing there, for example, it's all in real time, and also we have like a electric vehicle charging station, and usually something you usually shouldn't do during live demonstration, but since we are on a I try to do it, so maybe it works. Let's see, here we go. As you can see, we are providing the real-time traffic signals through the open standards APIs, and as you see, I'm not doing anything anymore. You see also the car detectors, you see the lane relations with their if they're allowed to go or not. So using basically the same standardized API to the public. And with that, things what I've shown here, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Michael, I will start with a question. We have seen you that the data platform, the urban data platform, bases their information on sensors and cameras, but we also share, for example, information about speed limits and how do you get that information, and specifically for TNITS, how would the TNITS service improve the urban data platform with trusted data? Because of course, coming from regulation, it should be more reliable.
The interesting thing is that we are like a governance agency as well, so we have the trusted data already. So therefore, we don't need any other specific layer in between. So, for example, if we can provide data to the public, like trusted data, for example, from the traffic department, we have direct connection to them. So they are responsible for data, but we have an automated process already implemented that you provide, for example, speed regulations, or like you have also real-time data for what's the present traffic, for example, and provide that through the open API. And you will find it, as I said, through the metadata catalogs. And one could be the European data catalog, since we're using the same standards there, or you can also use the transparency portal in Hamburg, and also our own metadata catalogs. And you can type in any data you would like to have, and then you'll find the go.
Absolutely, but and this is an exchange data format that it's your own property. But then, if you want to share this information with the map makers or other services, what would it take for you to consider TNITS as a standard to share this information?
The question is really, what is the standard of TNITS? Because we're using standards from the Open Geospatial Consortium, which is already an international consortium providing standardized APIs. And since we're talking about spatial data, and it's it's also the W3C is using the OGC standards. We're already providing those standardized API to the public, and therefore there's no other, from our point of view, there's no additional need to use any further standard to provide, since we have all the standards in place. That would be rather like ingesting data to the open data platform and provide that to the public.
Okay, but I think that is a question that we might have maybe a further discussion with, because we would be happy from our TNITS platform, especially the working group 2, which is about the specification, to have a talk with you and see how we can interact and cooperate further. Yeah. Thank you very much. So the next question, George.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting work you're doing. And just by the title of Head of Real-Time Data, it seems like your city is advanced in these things. My question would be, you showed us 4 or 5 distinct examples of real-time data use cases. It would be great to hear from you, how are you trying to assess and evaluate the value of these projects as opening up data and creating all of these data use cases? Is there any way that you're trying to assess and maybe quantify the value of this for the city?
That's a really good question, because I think it's really hard to measure the value for the city. What we realized by starting 2012, opening up the data, is that the requests on our services really increased dramatically, especially from the municipality agency already. So it was not the third parties in the first place. This was rather the municipality itself. So we've basically done the digital transformation, because back in the days, if you would have been looking for specific data, you would ask for a CD. Can I have the data on the CD? The CD was sent via mail to the other agency. It took ages for that. And that's just providing the data as service to the other agency. It really saved time. However, coming back to the question, that makes it difficult how much time you already have saved and how much in return of invest you already have. Then in addition, you have the act of transparency, which basically gives us a regulation providing the data to the public already. So there's the first is is there a need for the data? Who needs the data? And then how to provide the data. So that's the main specific question we're asking in the first place. And so we have no real evaluation at the moment how much money we have already saved with that.
Thanks.
Is there a political debate on that issue? Should we do this?
Not in Hamburg, since it's open already and we see the advantages already, not really like charging for data. Because all the time we're talking about open data, someone comes up and say, oh, I want to charge the data. And if you look for example to Helsinki or to Vilnius, they already open up the data, shows that the benefit is very high if you write that as open data. And if you go a step further, for example, since I'm paid with taxes, basically my salary comes basically from taxes, so it's all like public money providing, make it possible to do this. So basically what we are saying is like public code, public money, public code, and you could say like the same for data. So it's paid already by the taxes, and why not open it already and enable third parties like startups to come with new ideas. But we realize also in hackathons is once you open up the data, they somehow connected it together, which you've never thought before. And that benefit is way higher than if you would charge the data in the first place, because it's somehow like a barrier in the first time if you do so.
Are you helping then all the smaller cities in the neighborhood with?
We're helping the cities across Germany, and also we are involved in several European projects, for example, Smog in Helsinki. We are not developing on our own, so also connection with the other European cities to see, okay, how they scope with the challenges. But we have exactly as you say, we're doing a lot of consulting now for a lot of cities across Germany, because to see how it works, and then you're asking, okay, how have we done it? And then, for example, we have also a huge project now running together with Munich and Leipzig together for another next 5 years, where we are focusing on the connected urban twin to provide basically urban twin to the public.
Are you also collecting data concerning environmental zoning? So the Umweltzonierung.
Yeah. So for example, in Hamburg, you don't have the environmental zones. You have only certain lanes or certain roads which are closed or blocked for diesel, for example. And that data is also provided to the urban data platform as well. And also Google is using it already.
And what does it mean, blocked? Is there really a physical block?
No,
or is it just by?
It's just a sign sitting here for diesel.
And then you get a fine when you are crossing that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's different to other German cities that we don't have those environmental zones.
Okay.
I have a question. You mentioned that you're training or consulting other cities in Germany. And I can imagine that to share the database of information, they do not have standards yet. Or what kind of approach are you just sharing the standards you use, or because certain standards might be easier to use with pre-existing data format than others?
That's if you're coming. Listening to you comes in my mind, it's like you're asking always like the standards part, like you are talking, basically we're talking about competing standards, like you have seen like Tnts. So basically if you break it down, exactly, I know, so if you break it down, look and things. Just looking at, I also had the discussion with here the other day about SENSORIS. So like you have SENSORIS, you have the sensor things API, you have Fiverr coming up with some own specific. So basically you have like 14 competing standards. And it's like, I have the impression that most of them already came up like, oh, we have 14 competing standards. Let in that one standard which fits it all. And what we came out at the end, you have 15 competing standards. So basically, like we need to communicate to each other to see, okay, which standards might fit to each other and reduce the amount of standards. And that makes it really difficult, because also talking about smart city issues has shown us that a lot of like the car industry, like the municipalities, like any other industry you can imagine, they need to start to talk to each other, because they all of them, they have their own standards, and that makes it really difficult to implement the data to the public. And coming back to a question to the consulting of the other municipalities in Germany, it's basically to show them or enabling them to see, okay, it's not only the standards we're showing them they're using. Basically, we're following already the European approach of the Inspire initiative, providing spatial data to the public. So that's coming back from a regulation already. And we are trying to consult them, enable them to show them how have we done it in the backend, what is the IT infrastructure we're using. And for example, the real-time data infrastructure, we already provide that as infrastructure as code as open source, for example. So it would be any municipality is able to run a Kubernetes cluster, can just build up their own infrastructure based on our inventions we have already. So that's the type of consulting they're doing.
And I think the standards, they are mainly based on use cases, right? And the stakeholders that are involved in these use cases. A municipality is different. I mean, you're open to everyone. You provide to the public. So, of course, these data can be used then by different stakeholders, different people. Then what standard you use, it's up to you. The question is more how you adapt one to the other. I mean, we shouldn't have any barrier, right? It's not typically in SENSORIS, we upload the data from the sensor, the vehicle sensor to the cloud. The city cannot do that, right? You do not have access to the data that are in the vehicle, right?
Exactly.
So we define the format, we provide that data in certain format, and then this is afterwards used by service application, by public authorities to verify maybe your data or to enrich or whatever. And then there is a conversion of what we have done to your environment. And then it can go down again. But at a certain moment, we need to be careful of avoiding incompatibilities, I would say, and to ease the thing. This is why we need some time to discuss. I would say.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And that's one of the main issues that, as you said, like, SENSORIS is like a de facto industry standard, but it's not yet.
Now, but now we.
Yeah, but it's the same, like Fiverr saying the same coming up. So it would be interesting having someone from Fiverr sitting in EB, because they would say the same thing. And then if you look into, if you stay with Fiverr in the same organization, then you have 1 and 2M at the same spot. So it's really interesting to see how many of those different type of standards they're claiming all the same. We are the one.
There will be ISO standard. Because this is what we're doing now.
Well, SENSORIS, for example, is already part of the ISO part. So of the OGC is coming part of the ISO, and well, basically it's the same. It's the same problem we're facing throughout the last couple of years. That we have like struggles if you, for example, from your system, you're collecting data from the cars to your cloud. From our point of specific, it's a domain-specific system.
Mm-hmm.
We are not the one doing all the device provisioning, device patching, security stuff. That's not our part. We are connecting to the domain-specific system integrated with another platform. And we are facing like myriads of different standards in the southbound, and then we collecting all the data and then provide that to the northbound using, well, basically the moment SensorSyncs API, the standards from the Open Geospatial Consortium.
Okay, thank you to all very much. Yes, before I take the next question, in the interest of time, I just wanted to ask to the audience, who amongst you is a representative from a city? I think the gentleman there. Great. So please say your name.
Hi, I am Rob, and I'm from Brno City.
Hello, Rob.
I would like to ask you, you mentioned the infrared cameras counting the vehicles and number of bikes. How reliable is this data when you compare it to the real situation?
In an ideal situation, the company is saying like more than 95%. It really depends in which angle you have the camera. We also had some reliability issues with that company that we had like maybe more than 80% accuracy. So it really depends how the cameras are angled there. And we have it, if you drive around in Hamburg, you see it on the traffic signals, just on top of them, you see the small black cameras. That's the places where we do all the vehicle counting. And it's really like we have to take care that all the cameras is in the right space. And then if you take the counting of all cars, it's more than, I don't know exactly, it's definitely more than 95% accuracy we have. For the exact numbers, I need to ask the colleagues from the traffic department.
And in general, is the accuracy for cars better than for bicycles, or
Now, for the bicycles, it's rather more difficult because the problem the artificial intelligence has on the camera is to divide between a bicycle and a motorbike. So it's if we're using the bicycle counting, for example, we do it especially on cycle lanes. But if, for example, a motorbike would drive by, it would just count as a bicycle. So you still have those issues with that with the reliability, and we are still working on that to really distinguish between truck, cars, and bicycles. But as you said, like bicycles, it's really difficult. It's more difficult than other cars or something.
Do you measure traffic flow? Because counting is one thing, but the flow is also something.
With those cameras, it's just counting. So and using it's counting for providing the data for traffic simulations, and for the traffic flow, we are basically buying the data and provide that to the public as well. So we are not measuring. Well, basically, it's measuring. It's based on as I know it's coming from mobile devices, and we buy
the
that
camera
data.
could measure.
I mean,
the camera could measure the flow. I mean, I did that. I worked on that stuff. Anyway, it's
not in that project. We were just counting. We also have like tracking times between the cameras, but it's still in progress, that project.
Thank you very much. One last question from my side to the city representatives, especially those who are newer to Tnts. Do you have any question for us at this moment, or? No, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it would be great if you would like to know more, to reach out both to Frank, myself, to Ertico is the coordinator of the Tnts platform. If you're interested, if you're curious, send us an email and we will be more than happy to let you know more and to present on a more detailed basis what we do.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we do not have any other questions, yes, we do have
Sorry,
one.
but maybe just a comment on Michael. So the European Commission has understood that there is like this wild growth of standards emerging, and in a project they've recently launched, the NAPCOR project, so the National Access Point Federation project. There is an initiative to align at least a number of those mobility data standards to align and harmonize them. So that's on mobility data. Then there are a number of initiatives like OADF, which was mentioned before. Also TNITS are looking on the mobility data ecosystem and are kind of, labeling where each actor goes and where each activity goes. And there with TNITS, I think we have a deliverable coming up by the end of this year, where we discuss the data chain, of course, from a perspective of TNITS, but looking at the broader picture of all the actors in the system.
That's a great final statement, I would say. So I don't know if you, Frank, wanted to.
Yeah, I like to thank you all for this cooperation. I hope that we have given you, let's say, the overall picture of data provisioning, the role of the city, the applications, and the innovators. That was a little bit the aim. I also thank you for the sometimes lively discussion that goes on. And what I see is that there is lots of discussion to be progressed, and I see also a lot of opportunities for cooperation. So it's giving me a nice feeling that this is quite a successful meeting. I hope you do too, and give an applause to all the speakers. Have a fantastic congress, I would say.
Yeah, and before you leave, you can grab some lunch.
Of course.